tonight was smothered pork chops, mashed potatoes, turnip greens, and cornbread. Jars of pickles and chow-chow and preserves sat on the table beside a sweating glass pitcher of iced tea. Ms. Elizabeth always switched to tea at dinner. Samuel and Boots often worked in a third cocktail, but drank iced tea too. It was two-fisted drinking, with one hand temperate and one hand tipsy, that Boots had once compared to those rough boys who have good tattooed on the knuckles of one hand and evil on the other. Ms. Elizabeth had to know that Boots and Samuel did not have a typical marriage. The 28-year age difference between them was just the start. However, Samuel figured that Ms. Elizabeth was so relieved that Boots had finally found a wife, any kind of wife, that she wasn't going to ask too many questions. Boots had been Samuel's English professor at Millwood College for Women, which was just up the street from the home he and Samuel and Mama Liz now shared. Samuel had grown up 2 towns over, the daughter of a mill worker and a housewife, and had come to Millwood on a full academic scholarship. She was the first member of her family to enroll in college. Boots had been her freshman English teacher, and she thought he was the most glamorous person she had ever met. Unlike the men in her hometown, he took pains with his appearance. His hands were soft, and his nails were clean and neatly trimmed. The color of his bow tie always matched the stripes in his seersucker suit. Boots was the author of a novel, This Quiescence of Dust, which had received a glowing review in the New York Times and had landed him on several lists of promising young writers. He dropped names in class like Miss Flannery and Miss Eudora, which always made the hair on Samuel's forearms prickle with excitement. After Samuel turned in her first paper in Boots's class, he had asked her to come see him in his office. She went there in a cold sweat, afraid she was in trouble because the essay she had written, about the horrific beating of a shy, bookish boy in her hometown, was too frank, too brutal to write about for a class. But instead, once she had accepted Boots's invitation to sit down across from his huge, polished walnut desk, he picked up her paper and said, "This is good. Remarkably so for someone of your limited age and experience. Have you ever thought about becoming a writer?" Samuel feared she might embarrass herself by crying. "It's all I've ever wanted to be," she said. She spilled all of it. The stories she had started writing when she was 7, the dozens of composition books she had filled with stories, some pretty good, poems, none any good, and ideas. Boots had looked her up and down, then looked back down at her paper. "Well, between the two of us, I think we can make that happen." Samuel had felt a pleasant, inflating sensation, like she was a balloon being filled with helium so it could float up into the clouds. She had never received admiration from someone she admired, had never had a knowledgeable teacher so generous in sharing that knowledge with her. It was new and exciting, a kind of love. It was a kind of love, too, she felt now, living with Boots and Miss Elizabeth in their family home in the row of fine old homes that lined Main Street. The 3 of them eating supper together at the kitchen table was cozy, especially with the gin making Samuel feel convivial, and Priscilla's cooking was good and plentiful, a contrast to the meals when Samuel was growing up, when there had been just enough to eat but no more. Having meat at every meal still felt like a luxury. After supper, they went back to the parlor where Boots poured them each a sherry and put a record on the turntable. It was always opera. Tonight was Maria Callas in Aida. Silence was the rule when listening. There was no talking, even when Boots got up to flip the record from side A to side B. Miss Elizabeth sat in the crimson wing-backed chair, sipping her sherry. Boots stretched out on the camelback sofa, closing his eyes as he listened, and Samuel sat in the rocking chair, listening too, but also watching her husband and mother-in-law as they listened. Sometimes, when Callas hit a high note, Boots's hand would fly up to his heart as though such beauty would be the death of him. Miss Elizabeth retired to her room after the sherry and the record were finished. Samuel and Boots waited until Miss Elizabeth had made her way up the stairs and closed the bedroom door behind her before speaking. "It's Friday night, Missy," Boots said. "What kind of trouble?"